White House continues to say that progress is being made when it comes to a potential ceasefire deal for Gaza and that an announcement could be made this week. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who was back in the Oval Office meeting with Donald Trump again on Tuesday, said that the talks focused on the release of Israeli hostages and that his goal is still to eliminate and completely destroy Hamas, so no real change there. Meanwhile, the bombings and killings of Palestinians continues. Almost 30 confirmed killed on Tuesday alone, with the hunger crisis that was created and the blocking of vital resources still unchanged. Well, earlier this week, we heard Benjamin Netanyahu once again voice his support of a plan to remove Palestinians from their land. And we heard Israel's Defense Minister, Israel Katz, saying that he had told the military to start working towards pushing Palestinians in Gaza into one camp on the ruins of Rafah, a site they would be screened upon entering and not allowed to leave. Human rights groups around the world sounding the alarm at plans of ethnic cleansing. Well, to get more insight on that, we can speak now to Senior Lecturer in State Crime at Queen Mary University of London, Thomas MacManus. Thanks so much for joining us here on France 24. Maybe we can start with that question of the plans to move Palestinians inside Gaza yet again, this time to one camp. Is that legal?
No, it's not legal. And what it sounds like the Israeli government is trying to do is trying to concentrate the Palestinians in Gaza into a camp. This sounds like a classic concentration camp. And so we are continuing to see a complete onslaught on Gaza, a complete attack designed to simply put, to annihilate the people of Gaza and the wider Palestinian population. And this is the next phase in that annihilation, I would say, to remove the people from their land.
And when Israel says it has the right to defend itself, to what point does it have the right to do that under international law? At what point is it seen as disproportionate and indiscriminate?
So the right to defend yourself is a basic principle of public international law, but it applies to defending yourself from attack from another sovereign state. It doesn't give you the right to defend yourself against an internal issue, which would be dealt with usually by police action or otherwise. So while Israel has the right to be safe, the idea that it has the right to self-defense under international law is just not the case. And any response that Israel has to attacks coming out of Gaza or otherwise has to be proportional, and it has to take into account the civilian population. And what we've seen over and over is that it cannot be proportional based on the sheer numbers of casualties we've seen coming out. And there is not enough thought put in and enough planning put in to protecting the civilian population. And actually what looks like we're seeing is the civilian population has been specifically targeted. And we've been seeing that now for about 20 months.
Indeed, at least 57,000 people killed. That's the number of deaths reported. It's thought to be potentially much, much higher than that. Repeatedly, we've seen hospital hit, refugee camps bombed, that food and vital supplies being restricted, another war crime according to many. At what point is it the legal definition of genocide? We have reached that point, haven't we?
We have reached that point, and it's quite clear that the majority of experts, both legal and from the NGO and socio-legal academics, have seen what's going on and are describing it as genocide. Usually with genocide, the most difficult part to prove is the intent of the perpetrators, but this has been rendered easy in this situation because of the declarations of the Israeli government officials, cabinet members, senior military officials on television, talking about the complete destruction of Gaza, talking about how indiscriminate their attacks are between civilians and fighters. And so it is well understood now with the ICJ announcing with their interim measures that they see that there's a plausible case of genocide. We know that it's war crimes. The ICC have issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, who seems to still travel freely to states like the US, which just really highlights the impunity and unaccountability of this regime in Israel now, who are getting diplomatic cover from the US, but also from the EU and the UK, which is allowing them to continue to carry on this genocide in the face of everybody watching.
Diplomatic cover for Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli militaries, but there's even more than that. There's financial support, there's the selling of weapons to Israel. I mean, does this not make other countries like the US or Germany in particular also guilty of war crimes?
It makes them complicit in genocide, and the Genocide Treaty is very clear on this. If you provide assistance to states who are known to be carrying out genocide, or even if there's a serious risk that there's carrying out genocide, which the ICJ has given us notice that there is serious risk, and that comes from the Bosnia-Herzegovina cases at the ICJ, then they must do everything they can to prevent it. And not only are they not preventing it, as you say, they are assisting with direct assistance, with weapons, with the diplomatic cover is probably the more important part, because it's stopping the international community from intervening with them. So Britain and the UK and the US using their veto at the Security Council to stop any kind of action from the international community to intervene. So there will be, I think governments will be very worried, and they will be getting legal advice already about their complicity and accountability that may not come soon, but could come down the line.
So international law then, is it never really applied while the crime is happening? Do we always have to wait, years past the date like we saw in other massacres in the past?
So if you want to talk about the International Criminal Court, that is strictly an individual liability court. So in those courts, we do have to wait until someone has been captured and tried, and that can be well after the event. But the Genocide Treaty itself talks about prevention and has prevention obligations on states. And that only makes sense if we do that before we get to the stage where we're looking at individual criminal responsibility. It only makes sense to intervene really this stage or before now. And so states are obliged to do that in any way they can. And the more powerful states have more obligation on them than others. And they will be now in violation of this treaty. And this is a serious offence in the international community. And what we're looking at is, we've heard human rights experts, Palestinian human rights experts, call Gaza the graveyard of international law. And that's what we're looking at. If international law cannot be upheld, then we are degrading it. And if we degrade it, where is that going to lead the world? And so this Gaza has been a test and has shown the failure of the international law enforcement mechanisms.
Indeed, Israel acting, as you say, for over 21 months now and continuing to act with complete impunity. Just finally, has there ever been anything like this before when it comes to international law and countries blatantly breaking it?
There is precedent for international an ignoring of international law. If we look at the Rohingya case in Burma, the Rohingya continue to be persecuted by the Burmese regime. This persecution is genocidal in nature. We still have 140,000 Rohingya in concentration camps inside Burma. And again, it's a similar issue of the powerful permanent 5 members of the United Nations Security Council refusing to get involved, or at least one of them having a veto, locking up the council so that people don't get involved, that states don't get involved. And what we're seeing is the endless suffering because of this impunity.
Very finally, how could things be changed so that international law could be applied quicker?
We have a problem with the Security Council in that it's locked up and protects its allies using the veto. So I think shifting more focus to the General Assembly, to the 200 or so states, would be a way of doing things that maybe getting a kind of a system where the General Assembly could override the UN Security Council, or if we have UN Security Council members taking a step back, if it's themselves or their allies which are under issue for a vote, that they abstain from these votes, could help unlock the Security Council as well. But as long as we have these members protecting their interests, their own interests and the interests of their allies, then it's very difficult to get anything done.
Okay. Thomas MacManus of Queen Mary University of London, thanks so much for your time and your expertise here on France 24. Much appreciated.